World War I is remembered for its violence, its noise, and its scale. The thunder of artillery, the rattle of machine guns, the explosions that reshaped landscapes and lives alike dominate memory. Yet for most of those who lived through it, the war was not defined by action, but by waiting. Long stretches of stillness filled the days and nights, punctuated by moments of terror so brief they felt unreal. Between these moments lay the true battlefield, time itself. The First World War taught humanity how to wait under pressure, how to exist inside uncertainty, and how stillness could become as heavy as any physical burden. This was the war of pauses, anticipation, and suspended lives, a conflict fought as much in minutes, hours, and years as in trenches and fields. The weight of waiting reshaped soldiers, civilians, and entire societies. Waiting began the moment the war was declared. Mobilization orders summoned millions, but before rifles were fired or trenches dug, men waited in stations, barracks, and training camps. They waited for uniforms, for equipment, for transport, for instructions. The excitement of departure gave way quickly to monotony. Days stretched long as recruits drilled endlessly, learning routines whose purpose seemed abstract. Many had left families and jobs behind, yet found themselves idle, caught between civilian life and combat. This early waiting carried hope. The war was expected to be short. Weeks, perhaps months. Waiting felt temporary, almost reassuring. It was a pause before triumph. That illusion dissolved as the war settled into stalemate. Once trenches carved the front lines into the earth, waiting became permanent. Soldiers waited for orders that might never come. They waited for relief rotations delayed by weather or command decisions. They waited for food, for mail, for sleep, uninterrupted by alarms. They waited for attacks that everyone sensed were coming, but never knew when. In the trenches, time lost its familiar structure. Days were measured not by calendars but by routines. Stand to at dawn and dusk. Sentry duty, ration distribution, maintenance of wire and walls. Hours were counted in shifts, not moments. The mind learned to stretch itself across long periods of inactivity while remaining constantly alert. This contradiction, boredom paired with terror, defined trench life more than combat itself. Waiting became exhausting. The human nervous system was not designed for constant anticipation. Every sound might signal danger. A distant whistle, a sudden flare, a shift in artillery rhythm could transform stillness into chaos. Soldiers learned to read silence with the same intensity they once read noise. Silence could mean safety, or it could mean something far worse: preparation. Many veterans later wrote that the waiting was harder than the fighting. In battle, fear had direction and purpose. In waiting, fear had nowhere to go. Time behaved differently at the front. A single night on sentry duty could feel endless, while months blurred together in memory. Seasons passed almost unnoticed, marked only by changes in mud, temperature, and light. Winter did not arrive with holidays or celebration, but with frozen trenches and stiffened hands. Spring did not promise renewal, only thawed ground that collapsed underfoot. Waiting eroded identity. Men stopped thinking of themselves as individuals moving toward futures. Instead, they existed inside the present moment, conserving energy, suppressing emotion, and adapting to routines designed to keep them alive, but not whole. Letters from home became anchors in time. Soldiers waited for mail with an intensity that bordered on desperation. The arrival of letters restored a sense of sequence. Yesterday existed. Tomorrow might too. Delays were agonizing. A missing letter could produce dread far greater than any shell burst. Writing letters was its own form of waiting. Men composed sentences carefully, knowing they would take days or weeks to arrive. They wrote about small details, weather, food, minor events, not because these mattered, but because they were safe. The real waiting, the fear and uncertainty, remained unspoken. Civilians waited too, in ways that mirrored and magnified the experience of soldiers. Families waited for letters, telegrams, news bulletins. Mothers learned the sound of footsteps approaching the door and felt their hearts race at every knock. Newspapers were read obsessively, even as censorship stripped them of clarity. Waiting became a daily ritual shared across entire nations. Women waited for husbands, sons, and brothers whose return dates remained undefined. Children waited for fathers they barely remembered. Entire communities waited for casualty lists, scanning names with shaking hands, hoping for absence as much as presence. Time in civilian life stretched and tightened unpredictably. A single afternoon could pass in anxious stillness, while years slipped by marked only by ration changes and war news. Waiting transformed daily life into something provisional, as if everything existed on hold until an unknown moment of release. Industry waited as well. Factories paused production lines due to shortages. Workers waited for materials, for wages adjusted to inflation, for news of relatives at the front. Farmers waited for laborers who never returned. Cities waited for peace to justify rebuilding. Even governments waited. Decisions were postponed, offensives delayed, negotiations suspended. The war created a world where nothing could fully move forward. Waiting took on a darker form in no man's land. Before attacks, soldiers waited in assembly trenches, pressed shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by silence broken only by breathing and the distant thud of artillery. Minutes stretched unbearably. Every man knew that in moments some would be dead. Yet nothing could be done but wait. This waiting was physical. Muscles tensed. Sweat gathered despite cold. Hands trembled around rifles. Minds raced, replaying memories, imagining outcomes, bargaining silently with fate. The waiting before an attack compressed an entire lifetime into a few unbearable moments. When whistles blew and men climbed ladders, the waiting ended violently. But it was replaced almost immediately by another kind of waiting, for orders to advance or retreat, for medical help, for rescue, or for death. The wounded waited the longest. In shell holes and broken trenches, injured soldiers lay for hours or days, waiting to be found. Time lost meaning entirely. Pain became constant. Awareness fragmented. Some waited with hope. others with resignation. Many died not from wounds alone, but from waiting too long. Medical systems were built around speed, but waiting remained unavoidable. Stretcher bearers could not reach everyone at once. Field hospitals overflowed. Recovery itself became a long wait for healing, for discharge, for news of the war's end. Prisoners of war experienced waiting as their defining condition. Captured soldiers waited for transfers, for parcels, for release. Camps imposed routines that existed primarily to fill time. Days passed with little variation. Hope survived in fragments, measured in rumors and distant announcements. Waiting shaped mental health in ways medicine struggled to understand. Soldiers developed anxiety, insomnia, emotional numbness. Shell shock was not only a reaction to explosions, but to prolonged anticipation without release. The mind could endure intense stress briefly, but not endlessly. As the war dragged into its third and fourth years, waiting transformed from temporary inconvenience into permanent condition. Plans for post-war life were postponed repeatedly. Education paused. Careers stalled. Relationships suspended. Young men aged without milestones. Young women delayed marriages, careers, futures. The war consumed time that could never be recovered. The sense of living in borrowed time spread. Many felt they were existing outside normal life, waiting to re-enter a world that might no longer exist in recognizable form. The longer the war lasted, the more distant peace became, not because it seemed impossible, but because it felt abstract. Waiting also reshaped morality. What once seemed unacceptable gradually became tolerable. Civilians adjusted to rationing, censorship, and loss. Soldiers adjusted to death as background reality. Waiting normalized conditions that would have shocked earlier generations. Yet within this endurance lay quiet resilience. People developed rituals to survive waiting. Soldiers counted days until leave, even if the numbers changed constantly. Civilians marked time with small celebrations, anniversaries, or routines. Communities organized concerts, lectures, and social gatherings not to distract from waiting, but to give it structure. Waiting forced creativity. People filled empty hours with writing, art, music, craftsmanship. Soldiers carved objects from shell casings. Civilians knitted, painted, recorded diaries. These activities did not eliminate waiting, but softened its edges. Nature became a clock when human systems failed. Soldiers observed birds, weather patterns, sunrise and sunset. Civilians marked seasons through gardens and harvests. Time reconnected to the earth when calendars felt meaningless. As the war neared its end, waiting took on a strange dual quality. Hope returned cautiously, mixed with disbelief. Rumors of peace circulated repeatedly, often falsely. Each disappointment made people more guarded. When the armistice finally arrived, many did not react immediately. After years of waiting, sudden resolution felt unreal. Some expected the fighting to resume at any moment. Others felt relief so intense it bordered on numbness. Even after the guns fell silent, waiting continued. Soldiers waited for transport home. Prisoners waited for repatriation. Wounded men waited for recovery or prosthetics. Families waited for missing relatives who would never return. Societies waited to understand what had happened to them. Peace did not erase waiting. It transformed it. The post-war world was filled with people waiting for stability, for economic recovery, for emotional healing. Many realized that the war had permanently altered their relationship with time. Life would never again feel guaranteed or linear. The First World War taught humanity that waiting could be a form of suffering as real as violence. It revealed that endurance was not only physical, but temporal. Surviving meant learning how to exist inside uncertainty without breaking. The weight of waiting shaped a generation. It aged the young, exhausted the strong, and altered expectations of life itself. The war did not only take lives, it took years, possibilities, futures that existed only as imagined plans. Yet from that waiting emerged a deeper understanding of patience, fragility, and resilience. Those who endured learned that survival was not always about action. Sometimes it was about holding on through stillness. In the end, the Great War was not only fought in moments of noise and fury, but in the long, quiet stretches between them, where time pressed heavily and humanity learned how to carry it.